Hi, my name's Liam.
I'm Grace.
And we own a business called Allscone. We started baking scones in East London a couple of years ago and selling lots of different flavours to street food eaters around East London. Earlier this year we brought out our first book called The Little Book of Scones, and in that we have a number of recipes, sweet and savoury. We have around 30 recipes in there, 15 sweet, 15 savoury, and today we're going to showcase to you some of our favourite recipes that sell well on the market stall, but also our favourites from us as well. So we're going to get started with that right away.
Our first recipe we're going to show you today is our orange and cardamom. This is one of our basic sweet recipes. Just use a basic recipe and then we just add in the ingredients. So we'll just talk you through those for now. We've got self-raising flour, butter, golden caster sugar, custard powder, 1 large orange, some ground cardamom, eggs, buttermilk, salt and icing sugar. And that's it. So should we get started, Liam?
Let's do it.
So to start with, take your flour and then we're going to mix the butter in and make it into fine breadcrumbs. Sometimes we do this in a blender, but it is nice to do it by hand and we'll show you that now. So it's just cut into fine chunks and you just literally just rub it together. It might take a while. You have to make sure that your butter is cold from the fridge.
The reason behind it is mainly to do with the rise that you get in the scones. So what you find is when the butter goes into the dough mixture and it's cold, as the dough mixture heats in the oven and the butter melts, it creates steam inside the dough mixture. And what this does is it enables the scones to rise more effectively, but also what it gets, which is probably the best bit about it, is you get lovely little air pockets inside the scones once they're baked, and that gives them a nice fluffy texture to them when you eat them and you slather them with loads of clotted cream and jam.
So once the flour and butter is broken down, it should look like this. It's just like coarse breadcrumbs. Yeah, and then those little bits of butter will leave those little pockets of air in there for when you're baking. Next, we just take 1 large pinch of salt and add that in. Then add your custard powder. And then Liam, you can be my helper.
What would you like me to do?
Do you want to grate the zest of the orange in for me, please? Oh, sorry, before we do that, we'll add our golden caster sugar as well.
Okay, so while Grace is mixing the dry ingredients together, I'm just going to zest 1 large orange into the mixture.
This recipe is quite Christmassy, and that's why we like it. Do listen to Christmas songs quite early on, don't we, Liam?
We do. We've got a bit of a Michael Bublé obsession, and he gets played at probably quite inappropriate times of the year because it's his Christmas album. It will be on at August in the house, won't it?
Yeah.
When we're baking together.
So when you are grating the zest off the orange, you don't want to go too far down into the skin because then that will give it quite a sour taste. So you just want to get the top of it and don't go too far down where it becomes quite white and pale. And we're going to add orange juice into the wet mixture later on as well, so you'll get a really orangey flavour through the whole scone. Okay, and then we're going to add the ground cardamom. In our book we say to add 2 to 4 teaspoons of cardamom, depending on how
much you like the stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah, we quite like it. We're going to add 3 heaped ones today, just straight into the mixture. And then all you need to do is just mix it with your hands, just so it's all well incorporated.
So in the book we split our recipe into 2 sections. So we have the bowl and the jug. So just makes it a bit easier to follow. So what we're going to do next is we're going to put the wet ingredients, mix those together, ready to go into the dry. So into this, first of all, we crack 2 eggs, so 2 large eggs. Into the jug.
That's a nice technique, Liam.
Thank you, Grace. I've been trying to teach Grace the one-handed crack for quite a while. So we put 2 eggs in there. Next in, we put the buttermilk. So the buttermilk, when it's in the mixture, it will react with the raising agent in the self-raising flour to encourage the scones to rise when they're in the oven. And then next, for this recipe we're only going to need half an orange, so I've chopped this in half and I'm just going to juice this into the wet ingredients. Let's squeeze that in, right in there. And then I'm just going to whisk that together.
Normally we add more buttermilk to the wet mixture, but because of the orange juice, we've lessened it considerably for this recipe.
Yeah, and also because the orange is quite acidic, you don't need as much buttermilk into that as well. So with this one, you have to be a little bit careful because unlike some of the other basic recipes, this mixture is quite wet because of the orange juice, because it's not as thick without all the buttermilk in there. So we're going to add it in, but maybe we'll just add in 3/4 of it and then test the texture of the dough to make sure it doesn't get too wet, and then if we need a bit more, we'll just add that in later. Would you like me to pour?
Okay.
Yeah?
The idea of this is just to start bringing the dough together. So we're just going to mix it using a spatula, and you keep on mixing until it comes off the sides of a bowl, but you'll see how it goes.
Yeah, so I'll pour you. Should do
yeah,
that?
That's fine. So you just kind of fold it in. It gets quite lumpy, but you have to just work with it. I think we need some more though.
A bit more?
Yeah. Normally you would just whack in the whole of the wet mixture and it would be fine, but like Liam said, the orange juice makes it really quite wet, so you just have to see how you go. We'll just finish it off with our hands, because then you can really start working the dough. So you just want it to come together enough so you can hold it in one ball. Then I'm just going to lightly sprinkle the baking tray just so it's ready for when we've cut the scones out. And then they're going to go on there. And I'm going to flour the work surface, and then we're going to knead the dough, but it's not actually, we don't knead it. We use a technique called chaffing, which is like a really mild form of kneading. So I'll just do it and talk you through it as I'm doing it. So you just want to push the dough through with the bottoms of the palms of your hands just a few times, roll it up, tuck the sides under, and then start again. So we just do this literally just a few times until the dough is smooth, but not super smooth. So I'll probably just do it once more. About that, isn't it, Liam?
Yeah, looks perfect, yeah.
Because then you can feel the smoothness, but it's not like smooth. If it becomes too smooth, then you've overworked it. Also, I'll show you, we're going to roll it out now. You can see signs of overworking the dough when you're rolling it out as well, so hopefully I haven't. You want to roll it out to a thickness of about 1 inch, which sounds quite thick. So to about there. If you've overworked your dough, then it will start to spring back in, and that will affect the rise of your scones, so hopefully you won't do that.
Makes them taste a bit bread-like, doesn't it?
Yes. Then we're going to cut them out. All of our sweet scones we cut with a heart-shaped cutter, just because it's nice. And our savoury ones we just use a round one, but you can do what you want, any flavour. We do dip ours in the flour, just so it doesn't stick to the dough as much. Just makes them come out a bit easier. When you're cutting out the scones, just push straight down and then don't twist, because that will affect the rise of your scones as well. Just keep dipping it in the flour as and when you need to. Out of this amount of dough, with this size cutter, probably expect to get about, I'd probably say 6, 7, possibly 8 scones. We'll see how we go. So far we've got 5 there. I am going to bring the dough back together again, but you don't want to do it too many times because then it will affect the rise of the scones. So I've just chaffed it once more and that's about it. Roll it out again. It is starting to spring back a little bit, so I don't really want to cut it again after this one. Out of that we've got 7, and then we tend to just pop the remaining dough in there as the runt, isn't it?
The runt of the litter.
That's the taster, that's for us.
That's our bit,
yeah,
after we finish baking.
Okay, so they're all on the tray, and then we're just going to brush them with a little bit of buttermilk. This just gives them a nice finish on the top. Just generous amounts of that.
So just to finish the scones off before they go in the oven, we just put a little bit of sprinkle of flour over the top of them. So I'm just going to sieve this over from a bit of a height. So these are now ready to go into the Aga. When we bake the scones in the Aga, what we do is we actually use the roasting oven. So we place them on the very bottom shelf of the roasting oven, and also to keep the bake even through the scones, we also place a cold shelf in the top, and that helps to stop the tops from burning because the top of the Aga is very hot. So what we find is that if you don't have the cold shelf in the oven, it will burn the top of the scones too quickly.
And they'll be in for 20 to 25 minutes.
Yeah.
We might turn them halfway through. We'll just give them a check after about 10-15 minutes, see how they're getting on. But yeah, you don't want to check on them too much because it might affect the rise of them. You want them to be just nicely golden on the top, but not brown, not too brown. Fingers crossed they come out okay.
Yep. Okay, so while the scones are baking in the Aga, we're going to create an icing to go over the top of the scones. So once the scones are freshly baked and they come out of the oven, we put this nice icing over the top of them. It gives them a bit of extra flair and makes them a bit eye-catching and nicer on the taste as well once they're in. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to add in, this is freshly squeezed orange juice. I'm going to put in 4 teaspoons of the orange juice. Next, I'm going to add in 3/4 of a teaspoon of ground cardamom. And then finally, I'm going to add in 4 teaspoons of icing sugar. So what we're going to do is we're going to whisk the ingredients together. Once these are whisked together, they'll form like a thick cardamom orange icing that's going to go over the top of them. This bit does take a bit of a while, doesn't it? Okay, so obviously today you can see that with the usual ingredients that we normally add in, that the icing is still quite watery. So if this happens, which is quite common, what I would recommend that you do is just continue to add more icing sugar into the mixture. So Grace, if you want to pop a couple of extra teaspoons of icing sugar in. And then I'll just keep whisking that to try and get the thickness of it, but if it doesn't come, then we'll just keep adding more to the mixture.
So we're just going to check them. They've been in there for 15 minutes. So we'll see how we get on. We might have to turn them. They're just getting crisp just around the edges. I'll just turn them anyway. And then I reckon they'll probably need a good another good 10 minutes in there. Done.
Okay, so what I've done is I've kept on adding the icing sugar until it gets to this sort of, it's like a custardy texture. So once it gets to that texture, we know that that's just about right, and that should be just right to go and spread over the top of the scones. So all we're going to do with that now is we're going to leave that to one side and wait for the scones to come out of the oven.
Okay, the scones have been in for just under 25 minutes. We're going to check how they've got on. Oh, they look lovely. So they've risen well, they're nice and golden on the top, and they're slightly crispy as well. The beauty of the agar is it gives them a really nice crispness. Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah.
They look lovely.
This one.
I'll leave that one.
So what we're going to do is we're just going to leave these to cool now before we decorate them, because if we put the icing on them directly, it will melt the icing too much and it will run down the sides. So we're going to leave those to cool for around half an hour, and then once they've cooled down, we're then going to put the icing on that we made earlier on.
So, scones have cooled, and we're just going to pop the icing on them. We've left the icing just to one side. We haven't put it in the fridge because you don't want it to set, and we're using a whisk to get the icing on. And it's a very casual affair. It's just drizzling over the top. You just want to get like a few streaks on each scone, like that really.
What will happen is once the icing's been on the scones for a couple of hours, you could even pop it in the fridge if you wanted to. What will happen is it will harden up on the top of the scones, so it won't be as runny as this once it's been on there.
This is the fun part. I like this part.
Looks great. Would you like a board?
Yes, please. So that's it really. We'll just pop them on here. The hardest part with these is waiting for the icing to set. Takes too long, doesn't it, really?
Yes. Especially when they smell this good.
Yeah.
What you'll notice about the agar as well that's great with this recipe and all the other scone recipes is the texture that it gives the scones. So unlike a conventional oven, what you actually get a lot is you get a nice crispy outer shell to the scone mixture, but it stays nice and fluffy on the inside, doesn't it? Which is our favourite thing about using an agar.
There you go.